Hello there, so we are going to talk about cells today, cell structure, and the key thing I'm going to be focusing on really is not just what the cell components are called and what they do, but also how you're going to need to tackle questions from the examiner in those exams which relate cells across the range of questions that can come up in biology. So we'll start nice and simple with a rough kind of cell shape for a bog standard sort of animal cell, and we're going to start with the first feature, which is the cell membrane. And the cell membrane is really, really important because it has the ability to control what comes in and out of the cell. So this is likely to come up in terms of diffusion of substances. Now, of course, if we're talking about what's coming into the cell, we're going to need oxygen coming in, we're going to need sugars coming in, and it is the cell membrane that controls this. So it has tiny little pores in the cell membrane that allow certain substances in and will actually actively uptake certain substances. For example, the brain will have certain receptors, certain protein carriers, which will actively transport sugars out of the blood and into the brain tissue against the concentration gradients if necessary. So with the cell membrane, we're talking about control of substances, moving in and out of the cell, and the sort of processes that we're looking for here are going to be diffusion. Now, diffusion of water is really important too. We're going to have water coming in or out of the cell depending on how hydrated or dehydrated the body is. Diffusion, osmosis, is the diffusion of water molecules across a semi-permeable membrane, and it's normally the cell membrane that we're actually referring to when osmosis occurs. And then we've got active transport, so a little reminder of active transport, and that involves energy. It's the only one of the three here that actually takes substances from a low concentration into an already higher concentration. So that's the sort of thing you might find in the cell membrane. It might be linked to respiration in terms of oxygen required in the cell and sugars required in the cell, but also about substances being exported. And the most common one you're going to need to be thinking about there is CO2, carbon dioxide produced from respiration in the cell, being exported out by diffusion. Oxygen in, sugars in, and that really there covers the basics of cell membrane. Now, inside here we've got mostly jelly-like fluid, which is where a lot of the chemical reactions take place. So we're going to put a little label here, and we're going to call this stuff the cytoplasm. Now, cyto means cell, and plasm's to do with fluid, so it's cell fluid. And this is where chemical reactions take place. Chemical reactions take place. If there's any help and you want to write or draw a diagram as we're going, then please do, and press pause and what have you. We have a lot of dissolved substances in the cytoplasm as well. So if you think about linking this to digestion, the products of digestion, so starch turning into sugars, those sugars are going to dissolve and they're going to go into the cytoplasm. Your proteins that break them down into amino acids, those products of digestion will also come from the blood and fill into or diffuse into the cytoplasm. And likewise, fats that you eat, when they're broken down or digested into fatty acids and glycerol, those products will also make their way into the cell so they can be used inside. So we've got a link here to soluble substances being dissolved in here as well. So, next key feature that you'll normally recognise straight away, there's going to be what appears to be a dark dot in the centre of, or somewhere in the cytoplasm. This, of course, is the nucleus. And it's a nucleus, not a nucleus. So just careful about the pronunciation there. And what we say about the nucleus is it controls the cell. So it controls the cell activities. So that's the kind of stock phrase that you're going to be able to recall in the exam. And how it links in is that in the nucleus we have 46 chromosomes. So this links into genetics. So we have in human cells 46 chromosomes. And linking that to cell division, it's in the nucleus where that genetic material, these 46 chromosomes or 46 DNA strands, have to be duplicated to form 92 for a short period during mitosis for this one cell to be able to divide to form two different cells. So there's a link to mitosis there in the nucleus needing to be able to replicate the DNA before it's able to divide. Equally, making gametes, if this was a cell in either the ovaries or the testes, then this cell would need to replicate its chromosomes and it would end up dividing twice in order to form 4 cells with only 23 chromosomes in, and that way the sperm and the egg can have 23 each, one from mum, one from dad, to make that full 46 chromosomes. So a little link on the nucleus there. Now let's have a look inside the cell. We're going to find lots and lots of, I'm just going to put them as little circles for now. These are the power stations, if you like, of the cell. Now please don't say that in the exam, but I want you to think of them as power stations, because what they do is they take the fuel in, these sugars that come into the cell, they're going to make their way towards the mitochondria. So we're going to label these as mitochondria. And in those mitochondria, it's where the bulk of respiration takes place. Mitochondria. Now this is only one, so I'm going to call it a mitochondrion. And you've got to link mitochondria with respiration. And there's an exclamation mark there because the two words have to be just rolling off the tongue together. You get asked about respiration, you think mitochondria. You get asked about mitochondria in a cell, you think respiration. And when you're thinking respiration, you are thinking about, let's use an orange colour here, you're thinking about these substances here. Oxygen in, sugars in to the cell, and carbon dioxide, and of course water being produced there as well. So we're going to put H2O up here as well, just to confuse things a little bit further. So 4 key chemicals involved in respiration in every single living cell. If it's not respiring, it is dead. So, what else are we missing? Ribosomes. Okay, so what does the nucleus do? How does the nucleus control the cell? It has the blueprint for every single protein that needs to be formed in any cell in your body. And every cell in your body has a nucleus with all of that, with all the instructions on there. Now I will say the only exception to that is your red blood cells, and they've done away with nucleus. Far too valuable, that space. We want to pack those red blood cells full of hemoglobin, so you won't find a nucleus in a red blood cell. But every other cell, you will find one of these, and they are going to give the instructions to little structures in the cell which sit on slightly larger structures, which I'm going to draw a bit like this. It's called the Golgi apparatus. And we're going to put little dots on here. It's actually these little tiny dots that I'm putting on the membrane that are the ribosomes. And these ribosomes create proteins. So they're going to take the amino acids from digestion that come out the blood into the cell. They're going to bolt those amino acids together to make proteins. And those proteins will have all sorts of different roles. Those proteins might be structural proteins in the cell. They might be antibodies to export and help fight disease. They might be hormones which need to go into the blood to help do something around the body to make changes that are long-lasting. We're going to call these ribosomes then, and we're going to think ribosomes means protein synthesis. That means the making of proteins. Okay, so that really there are the key things about animal cells. So we've linked this to digestion, we've linked this to cell division, we've linked it to respiration. And we now need to have a look at now we've got 5 in total, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 structures in here, and for GCSE you're going to need to know 3 more, but they relate to plant cells. So I'm going to bring the board across here, which has some information about plant cells on. All of the structures that we've just talked about, all 5 of those organelles, let me put that word on here, these are all organelles we're talking about, these are structures inside cells. All 5 of those are found in here. Now the difference with a plant cell is plant cells tend to have a large vacuole in the centre. So what we've done is we've popped a vacuole in the centre of the cytoplasm and we kind of push that out. It's creating pressure within the cell, and the cell sap, water, fluids tend to build up inside the vacuole. Let's label that first as the vacuole. And as it fills up with fluids, it's going to create a pressure, what we call osmotic pressure, in the cell. And that word osmotic comes from the word osmosis. So it's all to do with the diffusion of water. As this fills with water, it creates structure, it creates pressure in the cell, which gives the cell support. Okay, so we're going to say this is filled with cell sap, cell fluid, and it provides structure and support for the cell. Now, of course, that's all well and good, but if we get too much water entering the cell here, then our cell membrane, which we need to be clear about, is the inner membrane here. We're going to label that as the cell membrane, because if you were asked to label this, you want to make sure you get them the right way around. That cell membrane can tear. If we spend too long in very high concentrations of water, our cells can actually get damaged. The cell membrane can split as the cell fills with water. Plant cells have a very tough outer layer called the cellulose cell wall. And this is the outer part here. So we're going to call this the cellulose. Now, while we write this down, cellulose is actually made from sugars. It's a carbohydrate. We just don't have the right enzymes in our digestive system to be able to break down cellulose and release the sugars that it's made from. So cellulose ends up becoming the bulk of the fibre in our diet, which is great for passing waste through the digestive system. So all those nasty chemicals, up to about 2,000 chemicals that you take in per day in your diet, can be passed through and not sit inside your intestines, attacking the inside of your intestines, which can lead to bowel cancer over time. So it's good to have lots of fibre, lots of cellulose cell walls in your diet for that reason. So cellulose cell walls provide structure and support. And this is the vacuole and the cellulose cell wall working together, cellulose cell wall keeping the structure and the vacuole providing osmotic pressure inside the cell. So these are 2 key parts of plant cells that you will not find in animal cells. And the third one is, of course, the green structures in here, which are called chloroplasts. And I'm going to write that in green just to make it really obvious. Chloroplasts. Now, like mitochondria, we thought respiration. With chloroplasts, you've got to think photosynthesis. Chloroplasts are where photosynthesis occurs. So we're going to put in here photosynthesis. Those 2 words have to come out together in your examinations. In your head, you've got to associate those 2 things together. Now, chloroplasts are the structures. The green chemical inside is called chlorophyll. And it's chlorophyll that can actually absorb the sunlight that hits the plant and turn that light energy into chemical energy. That helps to bolt together, or bond together is a better word, carbon dioxide and water that we're breathing out, and turn that into sugars and release oxygen, which is great. We eat the sugars and we benefit from the oxygen in the environment. So that's what photosynthesis is all about. We're linking the structures here, 3 key structures in plant cells which you do not find in animal cells. That question often comes up in the exam. name 3 structures. How do you know that these cells are plant cells? You're looking for the vacuole, an indication of plant cells. You're looking for cellulose cell wall as an indication of plant cells, and also of chloroplasts as an indication of plant cells. Now, a couple of exceptions here. Please be aware, you will not find chloroplasts in root cells, in root hair cells. They're the ones with the long extension to their cell wall and cell membrane. In fact, the vacuole extends up through these long hairs. I'm just going to do a little version of these up here now. And that vacuole extends all the way up, and the root hairs provide a nice high surface area for absorption of water into the plant. You will not, in a root hair, find chloroplasts because they're underground. There's no sunlight. The plants aren't going to waste energy. They're not going to waste energy making chloroplasts and chlorophyll to do a process that can't occur without sunlight. So that there's a root hair cell. Another thing to bear in mind is that bacteria also have cell walls. So just something to watch out for. I'm not covering bacteria in this video. So we've got 8 organelles. You need to know all 8 of them. You need to be able to try and associate them also with other parts of what happens in the body and which matches with what you've learned in your biology curriculum. Okay, this comes up every exam in some way or other. Some of these organelles. So I hope that's been helpful.